It is the Fenway Rundown, back to some regularly scheduled programming. In a way, I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam here. If you're watching on YouTube, we don't have an NIL deal with a microwave company, but we are in different locations. I'm back home. Sean is in Florida, in Fort Myers, for a few more hours before flight still on time. Cross your fingers, knock on wood, whatever you're going to do, and he'll be getting home. I came home Saturday, so this wraps up really the first stint for the two of us. Chris Smith will be down there for a few more days. We will both be heading down at various points in March. It's a long slog, and so we split it up, break it up, and I came home just in time for the blizzard. But obviously, you know, Sean's enjoying the weather a little bit more than I am the last day or so.
Although it's cooled off here considerably, Chris. It was, in the high 50s yesterday.
Yeah, as
So
I tweet,
I don't want to hear about shoveling snow, although I know you don't.
I definitely
Uh,
did not.
yeah.
The perks of a building. We are through really 2 weeks and a day since the first official day of spring training. And so, we've talked about on the pod, the Caleb Durbin trade. We had Roman Anthony. We've talked a little bit about some developments, but at this point, I think it's a good time to take stock of what we've learned about these Red Sox from the first couple of weeks. And so, I'll give you kind of three bullet point notes on what I took away from being down there and being around this team, roster construction, things like that. Number one, this Romy Gonzalez injury, I think, is in a pretty slow camp. Maybe the most meaningful development. Not that he was a guy that was going to play 162 games anyway, but it does not seem like he's close to returning. It does not seem like they are counting on him for opening day. I think this is a case where, based on some of his comments and some other interviews, he had an interesting one with the Globe where he mentioned surgery on his own. I think they're trying to push through and see what they can do, but they are at a point where they definitely think that this is a serious thing because it is something that didn't go away all offseason. To me, there's kind of a similar timeline to what Cutter Crawford had last year. Obviously, he missed the entire season. I am not saying that's going to be the case for Romy Gonzalez, but no coincidence they signed Connor Falefa and acquired Monasterio, a guy who I think now we look at as a pretty good candidate to have a pretty big role in this team because Romy's hurt. Number two, I think the number five starter competition is more of a competition than you or I would have anticipated heading in. I think we looked at it and thought, well, if they're going to give up the password and make a big trade for Johan Oviedo, he's probably going to be in that opening day rotation. They have not promised that, and maybe that's just giving, everybody else something to compete for. But as we sit here on February 24th, Oviedo, Cutter Crawford, Patrick Sandoval, Connolly Early, and Peyton Tolley, anybody could grab that spot. Four of those guys have options. The one that doesn't is Patrick Sandoval. Obviously, health comes into play. Crawford and Sandoval a little bit behind, but I think Oviedo's going to get it. But you could see a scenario in which he doesn't, and that to me is the most interesting roster battle on the team. And part three is, I think, based on everything we've seen so far, and I know they're going to flip flop list in the next couple days, but they seem to like Durbin at third and Meyer at second. That seems to be the preferred plan with potential flip flops here and there. But I think they like the idea of keeping Durbin in a place where he played last year and got comfortable, and they feel like Meyer can handle second. But in tandem with that, I would say Alex Cora's very clear challenge to Marcelo Meyer the other day over the weekend was one of the more interesting bits that's come out of this. So that's all to say. And we talked about this, in terms of everything going on down there. I would describe at least this first, 2+ weeks as mellow. I think that's in comparison to last year. Last year there was haymakers flying, and Bregman was there, and Devers was pissed, and Casas was weighing in, and there was injury stuff popping up, and this is a quiet, relaxed camp, and they don't have much to figure out in terms of the roster. Really, what's there to figure out for everybody is the personalities of the new guys, of which there are many. Obviously the big names: it's Suarez, Contreras, Gray, whoever, but also just a lot of back end roster guys that have not been there in the past. But I think a mellow camp, a quiet one, and that's a good thing for the Red Sox, and that's a good thing if you want kind of status quo with 4 weeks to go before opening day.
The password is tranquil,
Yeah.
not the outfielder, the password, but it is a tranquil camp. Very much in contrast to what we saw a year ago with the Bregman and Devers drama, the melodrama, what's going to happen every day. Is Devers going to demand a trade? How is this going to work out? And that was even before we got to the Casas injury and his refusal to play first base. Ironically, in a limited sense, we're still talking about that, still litigating it, or at least Tom Warner was. So here are my three takeaways. Number one, the messaging is still lousy as an organization. Stop running down players who aren't here anymore, even if some of the criticism is quite valid. And I'm talking mostly about Devers and less about Bregman there. It does no good to beat these issues to death. It continues to hone in on the narrative that the Red Sox are prone to backstabbing players after they leave. No good comes from that. You gain a bad reputation throughout the industry when you're trying to attract free agents. Stop talking about players who aren't here and don't figure into your plans anymore. That's number one. Number two, the Gonzalez thing is huge. There's no way, and I'm here to guarantee this, that he's ready for opening day. He hasn't even been cleared to do any baseball activity. When you think about the chances of that happening and him having no further setbacks, remember, this shoulder got a setback in January and got worse. So it's no guarantee that once he starts working harder here and doing more, that there isn't going to be a bump in the road. And even if it's a smooth road, I'm not sure he has time to get ready. We are just over 4 weeks away now from opening day, and he's nowhere close to taking the field. Don't see it happening. And what happens in his absence and wake is going to be fascinating. Monasterio certainly has put himself on the radar here as a guy that can hit lefties and move around the infield a little bit, so that'll bear watching. And I'm a little different than you on the fit starter. I think it's going to be Oviedo. I know you think it's more wide open.
I think it's
Uh,
going to be him. I just think that they're not guaranteeing anything, and that's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, maybe we're not that far off then in terms of how we view this. I think it is going to be Oviedo, and not because they made a trade for him and it would look bad if he doesn't crack the rotation, although maybe that's a tiny bit of a factor there. I just think that you've got some guys that you want to slow play. They're coming off years in which neither Crawford nor Sandoval pitched at all. I think they want to be very slow there. Crawford's behind because of the flu. Sandoval is not going to get into a game for a bit, so he's going to be and look, this is an opportunity for them, excuse me, to kick the proverbial can down the road, which teams love to do. Oh, we can postpone a decision for a week? Great, let's do that. That always seems to be option number one, not just for the Red Sox, but for many teams. So because they don't have to hurry these guys, they won't. I think they'll let them come along at their own pace. And it wouldn't be a bad thing in their mind or anyone's mind to have both lefty rookies, Tolley and Early, begin the year at Worcester, build up some arm strength, get some additional development in there, and be ready on May 1st if there's a performance or an injury issue.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how it's going to play out. I'll do a roster projection for Thursday. I'd probably guess that Oviedo gets it. Crawford's on the IL. Sandoval's a long reliever because he's out of options or on the IL. And Early and Tolley are both in Worcester. I would say that Romy goes to the IL. Monasterio makes the team. Obviously, there's not that many bench spots between Connor Falefa and Wong and the things that you outlined a few pods ago. And that brings us to the next continually most dysfunctional area of any roster in baseball, but in a really good way because there's a lot of talent there. The outfield. Um, we've been saying for like a year that something's got to give. Nothing's gonna give. I think at this point, like with a month to go before opening day, it's really hard to envision them swinging a trade for anybody involved. You know, big Duran or Abreu. I think it's probably untouchable with the way they're talking about him in camp. Obviously, Anthony's not going anywhere. Rafaela's almost certainly not. So you have those four guys, and then you have Masataka Yoshida, who is just a man without a home here. Um, basically the way that Red Sox decision makers were talking about this when I wrote that story on Yoshida a couple weeks ago was these things tend to figure themselves out, and let's say, Abreu pulls a calf or, God forbid for the Red Sox, or Anthony, gets hit by a pitch in the World Baseball Classic, then all of a sudden, Yoshida's your everyday DH and you can mix and match. So I guess they are comfortable with that, but they also acknowledge that like they haven't fully determined if all five of those guys can be on the opening day roster together. I've been talking about when's the right time to pull the ripcord on Yoshida for like 2 years. You finally got there with a column about a week ago. I know we touched on this a little bit on a recent pod. It's just, to me, I just don't see a lot of time where you can have those five guys on the roster. And, Yoshida's value is what? Certain pinch hit situations with no versatility. And, think about it. On the bench, you would have, Wong, Monasterio, Kiner Falefa, and Yoshida. Wong's a backup catcher. Yoshida's very limited. You basically have, the um, uh, two utility guys who basically play the infield. It's just they're still not at a point where this roster is perfectly functional. I know no team probably except the Dodgers is, but it's still glaring when you look at it and think about how it could all play out.
Yeah, and you wonder at what point um, does this become a not Patrick Sandoval situation, but a Pablo Sandoval, where you rip the Band-Aid off and
And
just
what's tough
release.
about that is that he is like a lot better than Pablo Sandoval was,
He was, and I want to make the distinction that while Sandoval was not regarded as a great teammate in terms of his conditioning and willingness to push through things, that Yoshida, there are no complaints
Yep.
from the organization or teammates. They like this guy. He works hard. He plays hard. He tries to help, but he is limited. And I guess I'm just wondering what's going to change, not just in a month or 2 months. He has 2 years left on this deal. I mean, is it going to get to a point where, well, okay, we're now below 30 million, so we can eat that, or we're under 20 million, so we can pull the ripcord now. Do it now and let this guy get a chance to hook on somewhere else. Maybe it's going back to Japan. Maybe it's getting a deal elsewhere on a minimum. If you obviously he's going to clear waivers if that's the route they take. They're kidding themselves into thinking that this is going to solve itself by some freak occurrence, whether it be an injury or a performance issue. Nothing is going to make Masataka Yoshida into the player they thought they were buying when they gave him 5 years and $90 million. It's sunken cost. It is taking up room on your payroll and your bench. Do it now. I don't expect them to, but they should.
Yeah, and I think it's just, you look at everybody's kind of out of place. When you look at, the plan here, it seems like Anthony and Duran are going to be your left field DH combo. Maybe that's good to keep Roman off his feet a little bit, and obviously Duran's plenty capable. Duran as your, main DH in 2026, is that a good way to build a team?
Well, it's I think if you're looking at defensive contributions, Abreu and Rafaela are certainly better defenders than Duran. And while Duran might be a decent center fielder, he has proven to not be even an average left fielder. So your essentially ranking these guys in terms of their contributions in the field. And though Roman Anthony doesn't have a ton of big league experience, obviously, I think the feeling might be that he has a higher ceiling as the left fielder. And maybe as a young guy, they don't want him at 21 years old DHing. So it's Duran by process of elimination. I'm okay with that. I don't think that I think there are going to be issues with Duran and maybe some focus. I don't know how the whole DH thing is going to work out, but it's to me the path they have to take. I don't think any other one makes sense. You certainly would not be taking playing time in the outfield away from two gold glovers in Rafaela and Abreu. And I think it's smart to, if you're going to give more at bat, look, they're both left-handed hitters, right? Anthony and Duran. It makes more sense for Duran to get more of those DH at bats than a 21-year-old superstar who is the center of your team and around whom you're building your roster.
Yeah. And here's an interesting thing that I think, you know, it's kind of not his fault, and it's just kind of the way the roster is and this dysfunctional mix that they have. And again, they have too many good players. That's the problem, and that is a good problem to have, actually. Doesn't make it not a problem, but it is, a good one. You're going to be talking about, Duran was an MVP type candidate 2 years ago on both sides of the ball, complete player, complete year, really, really good season, and looked like a cornerstone centerpiece of what you were going to do as an outfielder established and be there for a long time. There's a chance that we get to April 15th, May 1st, and he is kind of through little fault of his own, like a platoon DH on this team, because I think that they're going to try to protect him against lefties on, a lot of days. So I don't know how that manifests obviously with Romy out
Right.
of the mix. That's a little tougher to do. But if Monasterio is crushing lefties, or I don't know, Christian Campbell gets in the mix here, or Romy comes back and is healthy, you'd rather have, based on the numbers last year, one of those guys playing against lefties than Duran. I know he was okay against them a couple years ago. He just destroyed righties 2 years ago and was okay, pretty good against them last year. It's you have him, and what Yoshida's role has, the path is not too far from, having him and what the Yoshida role has been, a DH that you can't really play against lefties. Obviously, Durant is a much more complete player. He has more power, obviously speed compared to Yoshida. Like the defense is a lot better than Yoshida's, and especially if he plays center. It's crazy to think that that could be the role for him. And
Well,
honestly, he doesn't deserve it, but it's just kind of the way that this roster is built and continues to be.
well, and it's a further extension of the not so subtle message that the Red Sox have sent regarding Jarren Duran, and that is he's not necessarily part of the long-term future here. I mean, he's still got several years before free agency, but they've made no attempt to extend him. They extended Rafaela. They extended Anthony. There were at least, I think, some discussions with the Abreu, even if they didn't result in an agreement. He has not been approached, and I think that speaks to some questions the organization has about how well he's going to age into his 30s, given the type of player he is, and maybe some of the volatility that comes with him and a reluctance to invest long term.
Yeah, I think it just points to they should have traded him already, and probably after last season. I just think, it's a tough sell to have a homegrown guy, have a big breakout year and then trade him. But if you're, looking at it as a business, looking at his value never being higher, maybe never will be as high, like you probably should have done it, especially with Anthony coming up. I mean, I know hindsight's 2020, but you had the option of just carrying Anthony from opening day, and you could have done that then. And this offseason, I think they probably overvalued Duran. Um, and that's why he wasn't traded. I just, you know, the kind of the pathways to build this team over this offseason were trading an outfielder as a big chip and, sign for a pitcher, trading an outfielder for a big time pitcher, whoever it was, in a package, and signing a power hitter. Neither of those things happened, and you have, the team that they have now. So, again, we could hang up today. Sean could get on his flight, and someone could get hurt in an exhibition game. And again, knock on wood for the Red Sox, that doesn't happen, and change all these roster questions immediately. But for now, it's a weird
It's
one
an
for sure.
imperfect fit.
Bullpen wise, I also look at this as not that many spots. Again, I mean, um, there's always your kind of chance of an injury or a guy that steps forward. Kyle Keller's the most interesting NRI, as we've discussed. I think Moran makes it. I think Ryan Watson makes it. Zach Kelly, I think, makes it. Weissert, Whitlock. You got, Chapman, Weissert and Slayton. I mean, you got Whitlock and Chapman. There's a long guy in there somewhere. This is not really a wide open case. I think the better focus, instead of like, the finer points of Tyler Samaniego versus Ryan Watson, is, do you trust this middle group and the path to Whitlock and Chapman enough for a team that's going to be in a lot of low scoring games? To me, this is something a good friend Lou Merloni has talked about a lot. That would be something that, would scare me if I'm a Red Sox fan. And here's why. We think that all of the guys in that mix have the potential to be pretty good. Whitlock and Chapman, 8 and 9. As I've said, for them to be as good as they were, especially in the second half of last year, is a huge ask because they were perfect. You can't
Right.
expect that, period. And you can't expect full health from everybody either, which people do. But that other mix, Slayton's a guy who's gotten hurt. Kelly will be the first to tell you about his inconsistency, especially when it comes to walks. Weissert's a guy who seems to always hit the wall or give up runs in a big spot. And Giovanni Moran, as much as they like him, as much as this changeup is deadly, is a guy that we don't really know that much about.
Yeah,
And
had
Ryan
one
Watson,
good year, and that was three or
yeah,
4 years ago.
and Ryan Watson has no big league experience. So from those five, you're entrusting them with a lot and a lot of innings, especially early. Not Connolly early in the season. To me, I think that is an area of the roster where it's a little bit hairy. A proven veteran, you know what you're going to get. Even someone in the Justin Wilson mold, I think, might have made this roster look a little bit better. I don't know. It's just one of those things that, you know, it's a little bit hairy. Not a huge concern, but a little bit.
Yeah, they are thin in their middle relief. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We wrote the other day about them still looking to build up some lefty depth. That's not an easy thing to find. I'm not sure why they left it to the last minute, given that they had traded away Bernardino and Murphy and were not re-signing Mats, and all of a sudden this team that had so many left-handed options had virtually none, or certainly none with a lot of big league experience. So we're going to wait and see. But I think that is, and look, you can probably say this about a lot of teams, a lot of playoff teams. The kind of sixth and seventh inning is a little dicey right now when you look at what the Red Sox have available to them in their bullpen for depth.
Yep, and that's again, if you are going to outslug teams, not a huge issue. But for a team that is expecting to win a lot of games 3-1 or 4-2, then you're going to need people to step up. They need health from Slayton. They need a step forward from Kelly. They need Moran to be what they expected him to be. A lot of big ifs that will play out during the year, and the relievers you can find on waivers or whatever, but they'll need somebody. That's the Fenway Rundown for today. Sean McAdam is about to fly home, so we will let him go. Again, fingers crossed on that. As he leaves, so does a lot of players for the WBC. In the coming days, we'll be back with more later in the week.